Okay, here we have the front cockpit for the pilot's seat of the SR-71. At the very top, I'll point to it here, and this is the attitude indicator, pretty much like a standard attitude indicator in any airplane. Right beneath it is your HSI for all your navigation, and beneath that, I have to move the stick aside, this is our map projector. It runs on a continuous 16 millimeter, the old 16 millimeter stuff we used to have a long time ago for slides, and it's our map projector. The whole route of flight is contained within here the entire time, and that's what the pilot uses more than anything. Up here we have a airspeed indicator, which becomes useless once you go supersonic, and particularly up to Mach 2 and 3 and beyond, and we use this as our measure of merit when we get up supersonic. This is called our TDI, triple display indicator, because it displays in the top we have the knots in keys, knots equivalent airspeed. Then we have here is our altitude. Right now it's reading 61,100 feet. And below that, it's reading Mach 1.8. So this is our TDI, is what we use supersonically as for our measure of merit in terms of speed, altitude, and Mach number. And right here we have the fuel flow gauges measured in fuel flow in thousands of pounds per hour. So right now, these are reading about 5,000. This is reading about 15,000 pounds. In normal cruise, each one of these fuel flow gauges is reading about 21,000 pounds per hour. And you also have a digital readout up above as well as the analog. Here we have the oil pressure and the PSI for both left and right engine. Here we have hydraulic pressure for the utility system called L and R. This is the hydraulic surface pressure called A and B. So you have double redundancy in both utility and in the aircraft hydraulic system. Further off to the right here, if you can bring the light a little bit more, we have the fuel gauge. Right now it's reading a total of 21,100 pounds, but you see the gauge, it goes up to 80,000 pounds of gas. Beneath that is our CG. As we burn fuel, these are the 6 main tanks in the airplane, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, going aft. As the fuel burns in the right sequence, the CG will slowly move further aft and aft and aft, and once it reaches the max limit of 25%, that is as far as we want to go for the day. Anything beyond that, then the airplane will get very unstable beyond 25%. Down here we have a fuel tank pressure because we use nitrogen. Over here is our liquid nitrogen liters. This is 3 tanks. There's 2 tanks here, and here's the gauge for the 3rd tank that they added later on. So nitrogen pressure is used as a head pressure in all of the 6 fuselage tanks to provide a positive PSI of about 3 to 4 PSI all the time on the fuel tanks. The nitrogen is used to inert the fuel tanks. The fuel itself, internal to the airplane, will reach about 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the fuel internally. So to keep it inerted, so that volatility, the possible of an explosion with that fumes and everything, we inert the tanks with nitrogen to preclude that. If you want to move the CG forward, if the CG is too far aft and we want to move it forward, we tank fuel out of this tank number 6 and move it forward up to tank 1. And this is the transfer switch. You just move the switch up. It says forward transfer. Now fuel will now be pumped out of this aft tank and move forward, and you'll see the CG needle go down. You turn it off. If you see the CG too far forward and you want it to go aft for optimum cruise performance all the way back to about 25, 26, you turn on the manual aft transfer. So you have to hold it down. It'll take fuel from tank 1 and move it back to tank 6 to increase the center of gravity to the aft. This switch, though, unlike this one, is just spring-loaded, because a forward CG is not an unstable condition. It just the airplane won't be as efficient. But an aft CG can get you in a lot of trouble. So this one, they designed it that you have to hold that down. It's spring-loaded. I have to hold that and watch the whole time. As soon as I let go of it, it stops transferring. So this one they made so you couldn't forget it. Whereas this one you could forget and go forward. It doesn't really matter that much. This one you have to hold. Let's see, I'm going to switch over to this panel over here. This whole sub panel over here I call the environmental panel. It takes care of cockpit temperatures. These are bays outside the airplane. Here's the gear handle to bring the gear up. Anti-skid braking, runway, whether it's wet or dry, auto temperature, face heat temperature, cockpit temperature. There's your suit heat temperature, your landing light down here. Over to the left here, more, if you get some more light in there, those are the throttles. My hands are on both throttles right now. I'll bring the throttle forward. That starts the engines, the first notch. Then when you go to full military power for takeoff, you bring the throttle all the way up to it stops. That's full military power. Then when you want to go into afterburner, you have to raise the throttle up and then forward all the way to the firewall. And now that's full afterburner. We cruise in full afterburner with both throttles. And the pilot flies the whole time and just feels it. There's a little ridge here so he doesn't come back out of afterburner. You can feel a little bit of tension there so you don't drop back into the non-afterburning region. So you fly the airplane the whole time, moving them in and out, flying the afterburners to keep the airspeed the same throughout the mission. When you're ready to come down for the descent, we stay in afterburner the entire time we're cruising at Mach 3 or greater. And when you get ready for the descent, you bring the throttles back out, 100% military, and then slowly bring them back and then start a descent on down at a given schedule. We have to maintain a schedule and RPM and EGT on the way down. Let's see, what else? These are our little TEB counters. You can see right here, TEB stands for tetraethylborane. Tetraethylborane is a liquid chemical that we use for the ignition system. Tetraethylborane is a liquid chemical. When exposed to the atmosphere right now, it goes kaboom. It explodes automatically. It is also inerted with nitrogen on a tank mounted on the engine. The fuel that Kelly built for this airplane, JP7, has such a high flash point that it's impossible to ignite it with regular jet engine igniter plugs like we use on airlines or in the military. The spark is not hot enough to light off the JP7. So Kelly put his engineers to work and he said, come up with a way of igniting the fuel off. And they came up with a liquid chemical. It holds 1 1/4 pints of TEB, and I'll bring the throttle back to cut off. And when I move this throttle forward, at the right RPM, as the crew chief signals up and the RPMs are rotating the engine, I bring the throttle forward, and that puts a measured amount of this TEB squirted into the turbine section, and it goes kaboom, and that in turn lights off the JP7. And if you can see right down here, there's a little counter. It's called a TEB counter. This should be set on 16 before start, which is 16 right now, and every time you take the throttle and advance it, it clicks off down to 15. Now if I take the throttle and move it up into afterburner, it'll click down one more and it now reads 15. So anytime you use a shot of the TEB, you get each one of these TEB counters for each engine counts off. You get 16 shots per engine. Let's see, up here, I'll go up to the top here. These little mirrors, we use these. A lot of people think we like to comb our hair in flight, but they're actually used for looking at yourself on the pressure suit, because once you get in a pressure suit to see where the feeding ports are, all the connections, everything, this is all you have to be able to look around and see where everything's at, are these two mirrors up here. If I go up a little bit higher, we have our whiskey compass, which every airplane has to have, and you'll see a little bit higher, it says lock on it. That's our periscope. The periscope is now down out of the wind stream, but as soon as I push this up, it's a little bit stiff right now, but push that up, the periscope is now exposed. It pops up into the airstream about that far, and I can turn it left and right, and with prisms, I can see left and right outside. We use it for several things. Number one, if you had an engine fire, let's say, in flight, I can pop the periscope up and see the severity of either the left or the right engine. If I thought I might be contrailing at 70 or 80,000 feet, I could check in the periscope to ensure that I wasn't contrailing. You can also use it for fuel dumping, for termination. Obviously, when you turn the fuel dump on, it pumps out at 4,000 pounds per minute, and you'll see it on the gauge go down. And when you turn it off, you can confirm it also by looking at the periscope and make sure it's off as well. That's the basic use of the periscope. And then you bring it back down, it's out of the wind stream. Off to the left, I'll go to the right side here. These are called, we call them bat wings, but they fold down. These are sunshades. They move around. Anywhere that the sun's coming in, it is so brilliant at 75, 80,000 feet that as you go into the turn, as the sun comes across the cockpit in a turn, it wipes all the instruments out to the point where you can barely read them. They're very, very difficult to read as the sun moves across the front cockpit. So we use these bat wings to chase the sun around so it won't come in the cockpit. And you, like I say, they open up, close them, and then stow them away off to the side. This little device is something that was added on about 1977-78. We started to fly more and more night missions in the SR-71. Up until then, the airplane was basically a day VFR airplane. You had to have good weather at the target area to get the imagery, because it's what I call wet film photography. Well, eventually we got a radar nose that took pictures with radar day or night. In the weather, it did not matter because it's a radar image. It doesn't make any difference. So we were flying a lot more at night, and we were starting to get a little bit nervous about flying the airplane at night. The clouds, there's no clouds at night. The sky, the stars, they blend in with like the East China Sea and the fishing vessels down there. You cannot tell the difference between the sky and what's upright. So we asked Lockheed to come up with an invention that would help us maintain orientation in the cockpit, and they came up with this PVD. It's called a peripheral vision device. It's a laser. It has a Canon plug that goes back here onto very precise pitch, roll, and yaw sensors, feeds the information into this laser, and it puts out a beam up here that then shoots up into the cockpit and draws a line across the cockpit. Anyhow, this laser beam then projects a line across the cockpit. A very brilliant line. You can move it up or down as necessary. You can lower its position. I always kept my line coming about right through here all the way. And what it does is the airplane rolls, this line will roll with you. If you pitch up, the line pitches up and pitches down. If it reaches limits of bank or pitch, that line flashes at you, alerting you that you're reaching a limit. And what it does at night flying, it gives you another orientation to the horizon. It's not meant to be flown like an attitude indicator or anything like that. It's just a orientation. Like in the daytime, we look outside and get oriented to the horizon. In this, we get oriented to the PVD red line up there. And it was a real lifesaver in some cases. Some guys were getting bank angles up around 60 degrees of bank at Mach 3, and it just, that's not good. It's come very, very close to losing the airplane. These are just what we call a Gooseneck Light. It's a lamp, or you can turn it on. There's your intensity. Then you can shine this down. You can aim it on your checklist, which is usually on your knee, on your pressure suit knee. You can aim it on your checklist for reading. There's one of those on each side of the airplane. There's another one over here. You can shine it wherever you like. And again, we got another bat shade on this side to chase the sun around as necessary while we're flying. Of all the 86 pilots that flew the airplane operationally on the reconnaissance missions, flew in this simulator, all 86. Obviously, we had other people fly the airplane, senators, congressmen, generals, newspaper reporters that had to, got the permission from the Pentagon. Anyone that could get the permission from the Pentagon, we took up in a B model trainer flight and gave them a flight as well. So if you exclude all those, and I exclude the test pilots and everyone else, the operational pilots comes out to 86 pilots and 86 navigators. As you can see in the back seat, the RSO's got a little bit more room, but one thing that's missing up here in the back seat is no flight controls. And that emphasizes the reason why we want to have a good physical before every flight in the airplane and make sure the person's ready to go and there's no problems. For instance, if we were flying along and I had a heart attack in the front seat or keeled over for some reason, he has no flight controls in the back here. The best dawn my RSO could hope for that we were on autopilot, and if we're on autopilot, he can then fly it with the Astro Tracker. He can navigate it. He can tell, okay, take this airplane to Okinawa, or get me back to Mildenhall, or let's go out over the ocean, or let's go somewhere. get out of the bad guys. So he can still steer the airplane if I'm on autopilot. And then the best he could do is probably the best for him would be wait for the engines to just flame out, run out of gas, slow down below Mach whatever we were at the time, and just slow down, and then he'd get out into the safe ejection. Now, put the reverse on. I'm in the front. Let's say he has a heart attack in the back seat. I've got flight controls. I can keep flying it, but guess what? I can't tell this airplane where to go. He's got the only navigation set right here in the world. I have all the displays of where we're at and where we are at and how far out we are and all that. I have all the instrumentation to tell me. But as far as telling this airplane where to go, there's nothing up here. Now, I can still fly it. Obviously, I can still fly it with a yoke. But I could be over in the Barents Sea up in Murmansk, and you know, how are you going to get home? You just fly just headings or what? So there's a dual responsibility here for both of us to stay in good shape. And I've always told myself if Don ever had a heart attack, I'd just start to use the whiskey compass and some of the other stuff and just head for where I think the best, safest area is. Because I cannot control the airplane where to go. This is the Astro Tracker that works off the stars. This is the whole set, and it tells the airplane where to go. And he can change it to whatever he wants. A few other features in here. This folds down. I showed you the map projector up in the front cockpit, the little map projector I had, that looked about 4x4. This is his map projector. Down here is the actual projector. That's his focus knob, and he folds this down, and he gets a much bigger display of the route of flight and everything on it than I do, because he has to have the information not only of what I have, plus he has to have all the information of the sensors and where they're going to work and where they're looking and stuff like that. So his map projector is much bigger. This screen right here is called the RCD. It's a radar correlator display. Anytime we're taking images with the radar nose, this radar correlator display will show you exactly what you're seeing, what's being picked up on that radar 60 seconds later. It takes 60 seconds to process it with lasers internal to the airplane. It processes those images and presents them up here on this RCD display for him to see 60 seconds later. This is the view sight. The view sight looks directly beneath the airplane. It's got magnification powers. You can use it looking directly beneath the airplane for fixes, for navigational fixes, and for looking at anything on the ground. So, view sight, RCD, map projector. He's got repeater instruments of the TDI that I have up in the front. He's got an RMI card. He's got a small attitude indicator. He's got the fuel gauge, just like I do. He's got a few warning lights. Over here, he's got 3 lights over here. If we lose communication with each other, because normally we talk over the interphone, but if we lose communication with each other, and I have a serious emergency, I've got a switch up in the front cockpit, I throw it up. And this light will illuminate, in fact, this orange light will illuminate saying, hey, I've got a problem. I don't know what's going to be the outcome, but be prepared. Go through your pre-bailout checklist. If I have to bail out, and I don't have time, again, I can't talk to him, I have another switch, which I have to break a safety wire, because this one's a real go. If I break the safety wire and throw it up, he gets this light right here, and it says eject. I'm telling him verbally to eject with a light, because I have no more communication with him. And this is one we don't play games with. When that one goes off, you go out of the airplane. You have to go first. You want to go first, and then a pilot will go second, in that order. If I go first, and then he goes, he could run into my seat and anything, and we could have a collateral damage, so we don't want that. He goes first, and I go second. This switch, if he didn't listen to me with this switch, this one says, pilot just ejected, you're a little late. So that's what that one is right there. And I have the same light up in my cockpit, so when I see him ejecting, I get a light that says, RSO ejected. So that's how we communicate with no verbal communication during an extreme emergency. And again, a lot more room in here. He just has rudder. There's no rudder pedals. There's just footholds, if you would. Nice windows. He's got a window up to the left, right. They got Velcro. You can stop if he's too bright for him. You can just pull the window shades up on both sides. He's got mirrors like I had up in the front. He's got the same gooseneck lights like I had. And that's about it. Much more roomier up in the back than it is up in front.